The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waking humanity, one soul at a time. This is The World You Don't Know radio show with your host, Nick O'Connor.
Now, hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome along to this week's edition of The World You Don't Know with myself, Mick O'Connell. And I do have a guest lined up. I've got Mark Devlin. Now, Mark has been on my show before, and Mark is a DJ and he's a researcher as well. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is the darker side of the music and the acting industry and related issues. Now, I've had Mark on the show before, and the reason I'm getting Mark on tonight is because, and fair play to him, he's come on at the last minute. I was hoping to have, as I mentioned before on previous shows, John Wilson, the Garda whistleblower, but due to unforeseen circumstances, he can't come on just yet, but I am hoping to get him on in the very near future. He is meant to be appearing at the Open Minds Conference on the 4th, the 2nd, 3rd and 4th of March in Dooley's Hotel in Watford. Now, my next guest, Mark, he will be appearing at Open Minds 2 in Dooley's Hotel in Watford. He has been at the last one, the first one, he appeared at that, and I did have him on my show in and around that time as well last year. So, without further ado, I'm going to go straight to Mark anyway, because, yeah, we've got an hour, so we'll have a good long chat about the darker side of the music industry and the acting industry. So sit back and enjoy. Talk to you now in a sec. Now, good evening, Mark. Are you there?
I'm here, mate. Yep.
Oh, lovely. You're coming in nice and clear. You're very welcome on to the World You Don't Know show. Thanks for coming on at the last minute. I appreciate that.
No worries. Good to be back.
So you're appearing at the Open Minds 2 conference for a second time.
Well, that's right. That's right. Last year's event was an incredible gathering of like-minded individuals and empowering information. And it was a great event for an inaugural one, first time round. Great success, I thought. Very positive feedback from everyone. So I'm really pleased that there's going to be a second one, and I'm happy to be a part of it. This one's got even more speakers than last time and just loads of stuff crammed into the schedule. So should be a really exciting and worthwhile weekend.
I've had Nick Colostrum and Max Egan on now for the last couple of weeks on the show in the run-up to March. I'm getting as many guests from Open Minds 2 to come on to my show. I won't have time to have them all on, but I'll get a good few on, including yourself. So you're going to be talking about the music and the acting industry, and in particular what you term lifetime actors, people who are selected for those positions.
Well, that's right. It crops up in my new book, which has just come out, Musical Truth Volume 2. I'm going to be presenting aspects of that book. I've yet to fine-tune the talk to know exactly which aspects I'll be presenting, but it all comes down to the same thing, whatever parts I decide to put out there, and that's we live in a world of deception. We're lied to about pretty much everything from establishment sources from the day we come into this world, and it seems a small number of us are able to see through that deception at some point in our lives, and we have the courage and the integrity and the balls, if you like, to pierce the veil and face up to the reality of what this world really is and who's running things. The vast majority of people, it seems, just don't want to know, and no matter how much of this information you try to put in front of them, they're just not having it. But thankfully there are a small number of people that do want to discover truth, and like me, they get hacked off at being lied to. And I think that's the point I'm going to be making at the outset of my talk. The whole reason why I do any of this is because I'm somebody that has always hated being lied to. I don't take kindly to being made a mug of. And when I discover that I've been deceived, I'm not happy about it. I want to know how it happened. I want to discover the methods that were used, and I want to resolve to never let it happen again. So in the words of The Who, with their famous song, "Won't get fooled again." That's what more of us need to do.
You were a successful DJ throughout the 90s, because I've looked at your back catalogue of the kind of work that you've done, the places that you've played in and stuff like that. So, I mean, you had a good career as a DJ. So what woke you up? What got you interested in all of this? Because, I mean, for most, I'm not going to say, well, I will say normal DJs, those who are not interested in the kind of things you're interested in. What swayed you from just being a DJ to getting into all of this?
Well, I think my journey as a DJ was essential in terms of getting me to where I am now, and I've reflected on this a lot in recent years. And many times when I think back to the fact that I got started as a DJ in 1990 and I didn't wake up, in inverted commas, until 2010. So that's 20 years. So you could say I'm a slow learner. I took my time. And I can look back on those 20 years and sometimes I consider it wasted years. And I think, what the hell was wrong with me? Why could I not see this sooner? But then other times when I'm more reflective about it, I think, well, it was all part of getting me to where I am now, to give me the perspectives and the insights that I now need to have been able to piece so much of this information together and to be in a position now to present it to people in terms of my books and my public talks and stuff, in the hope that others can follow the same path that I have and wake up to these very important truths. So I think everything happens when it needs to and not a moment before. There wasn't really a single catalytic moment for me or a eureka situation. It was really just a long drawn-out process of asking lots of questions about the true nature of this world and why there's so much lies and deception and why the official story of so many things just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. And at the end of a long process of that, I just kind of came to an understanding that I'd been lied to all my life and I needed to reassess my view of everything and start again with a blank sheet of paper, so to speak.
And when did you discover that the music industry, and we'll focus on that for the next few minutes, when did you discover that the music industry wasn't what you were led to believe it was? After being a DJ for 20 years, I'm sure you would have brushed up against some, maybe not major celebrities, but minor celebrities in the music industry and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough, well, if you consider it fortunate, I did at the time, to have interviewed a whole bunch of artists on the hip-hop and R&B front. I suppose the most famous would be Beyonce. When Destiny's Child first came out in 1998, they were a completely unknown group. And I got an interview with the four girls. I was doing a radio show at the time, and the record company were keen to get them out on any radio shows they could. So I was sat next to Beyonce on a sofa. That's never going to happen again. But
and do you think, like, when you met Beyonce back when she was in Destiny's Child and they were trying to get themselves out there and get known, did you see her as a control figure even then, or were you none the wiser?
Oh, absolutely not. I was completely oblivious to all of this back then. I was an industry player. I was a music industry stooge. I was doing everything that DJs are supposed to do. I was a good, obedient little servant of the industry, playing all the records that the record companies sent me and dealing with all the promotional priorities, interviewing artists, getting their stuff out there. I didn't know any of this stuff. I was just completely blind to it all. It wasn't until years later. I met Beyonce in 98, and I would say I first realised that something was very, very wrong with the music industry in 2010. So that's why I say I was a slow learner. So I met a whole bunch of these artists and just went through all these processes that people do in the industry, and I never had any reason to question it until I started questioning other aspects of society and life. And it was reading the books of David Icke, to be honest, that put me on this path. It was around about 2007, 2008. My dad put me onto the books of David Icke because he was reading it. And,
he was reading them around that time himself as well.
Right. Okay. Well, that really kind of shook me out of my trance state and really gave me the kick up the arse that I needed to start paying attention. And when I realised that the world was going to hell fast, I realised that the music industry that I was a part of was a very key part of it all. And it went hand in hand with all these other aspects of society. And that made me think, my God, what is it that I'm a part of? What have I been working within all these years? And it was at that point that I resolved to find out all I could about the true nature of it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
It's history. I mean, I would have become, I suppose, growing up, you're watching movies and stuff like that, and you see these actors and stuff, and you put them on that pedestal, you think they're famous, and, well, they're famous, but you think they're these special people and stuff like that. But I was around, I'd say 18, 19, and I was working with a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, who I still see on a regular basis. And this guy is nearly 80 years of age now at this stage. Yeah, he is 80 now, I think. But he was telling me a story nearly 30 years ago about a Hollywood actor from the 1920s and 30s called Fatty Arbuckle. I don't know if you're aware of him, but he was telling me this story about, he went through these 3 trials. Hollywood put him on trial 3 times, in the courts as well, for an alleged rape of some girl who was at this party or something like that, and he was meant to have raped her with a whiskey bottle. And that was the story that went with that. But I can remember thinking then at the time, how disgusting that was and how sick you think of these actors who are these big famous people. He was in and around the time of Charlie Chaplin and stuff like that, so he would have been at the top of his game. And, privately, this is how they're behaving. And it was then that it struck me, if he's at it, they're all bloody at it.
Yeah. I've not heard the story of Fatty Arbuckle. I know there's restaurants that are named after him.
Which?
There's some restaurants called Fatty Arbuckles named after him.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
But he was a famous Hollywood actor back in the 1920s, and he would have been one of the biggest Hollywood actors in his day. He fell from grace, basically. But once these 3 trials got out of the way, that was it. That was the end of it. I mean, he was acquitted 3 times. I mean, but they'd done their best to try and convict him, but they couldn't.
Yeah, it's been going on forever. Decade after decade. I made the mistake when I first started doing this research of thinking that the debasement and corruption of the music industry was a relatively recent thing. So I was looking at Britney Spears and Miley Cyrus and Beyonce and Kanye West and thinking, what's happened to the industry? But the more I delved into it, the more I realised it's been like that since day one. All these occult influences, all this ritualistic symbolism, all the sordid kind of background detail of so many of these artists and producers and industry executives, it goes all the way back to day one in Hollywood, just as it does in the music industry. And many would maintain that the whole reason for these industries being set up in the first place was because of the incredible opportunities that they offered for mind control and brainwashing and sowing of value systems and beliefs into the mindset of the general public. That certainly seems to be what they've been all about.
And that's exactly what it's doing. I mean, I would have listened to the likes of Jordan Maxwell back in the mid-2000s, and I became very, very aware then of so-called Illuminati symbolism. And now when I look at music videos from the likes of Beyonce, Jay-Z, and all these other top international music stars, all the videos are full of this symbolism.
Well, Mick, let me tell you, at the Open Minds Ireland Conference, I think you're going to be in attendance there yourself. So what I'm going to be doing is showing some stills from a whole bunch of 1980s pop videos, because during the course of the research for the book, I thought to myself, I know how to spot all these symbols that are now going into Miley Cyrus videos and Lady Gaga and artists like that. But I wonder if all these same signs and symbols and motifs and sigils have been there for decades, and we've just not noticed them because we've not known what to look for. I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go back to a whole bunch of the pop music that I was raised on in the 1980s and see if these same signs and symbols are there? And blow me, would you believe, there they all are. In videos from the likes of Adam and the Ants, Kim Wilde, Madness, the Eurythmics, Ultravox, David Bowie, so many acts, many of which I can't bring to mind at the moment, Culture Club, so many others. You see the black and white checkerboard floors that you get in Masonic temples, which symbolise base consciousness and duality, and they're part of occult mystery school teachings. You see shattered mirrors, which are indicative of trauma-based mind control programming. You see dolls and teddy bears, which also hark back to the loss of childhood innocence that comes from the mind control programming that many of these artists go through. You see Kabbalistic, Masonic, other mystery school type symbology cropping up in all these videos. And there they all were on display in the 80s. Didn't have the internet back then. We didn't have the opportunity to communicate this information. So much of it went into the subconscious mind of the collective general public and was absorbed and was working its magic.
And that's the whole idea of the symbolism, isn't it? They want to penetrate it into your subconscious mind.
Absolutely. And if you're not aware of what it is you're absorbing, then it works its magic on you. It has its effect.
And you think it does actually have some sort of an effect on people?
It does, absolutely. It's they know what they're doing, these practitioners. Those that run these industries are dark occultists, and they're very adept at their magic, at their sorcery. They know how the human psyche works. They know how to manipulate it. They know how to get inside the collective consciousness of large groups of people, and they understand the language of symbols and how that speaks to the subconscious mind. And we profane ones, as they see us, if we don't understand how all that is done, then we're just complete suckers for it. We're soaking it all up like a sponge. So the key to it is getting familiar with these signs and symbols and understanding what they mean and getting it into the conscious mind. And that's what my work is all about, trying to get people to understand what's being done to them and to be able to spot all these indicators so that it breaks the spell and people are no longer under that mass mind control.
We keep mentioning they, you know, and people often ask me, like, who are they? Who are these people that are running all of this, Mark?
It is very difficult to put specific names on it. There are obviously certain families and certain bloodlines who always come up in these types of conversations. You get names like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Windsors, the royal family, so-called. And you can get names like the DuPonts and the Astors and the Morgans, all these elite oligarch families and bloodlines. But in terms of the ultimate controllers of these industries, I think they do a pretty good job of keeping themselves hidden, the real key players. I mean, there's names like Clive Davis as well, who was closely associated with Whitney Houston and all the strange business surrounding her demise. Clive Davis was the industry executive who is said to have discovered Whitney Houston, and he famously threw this party in her honour when her body had already been discovered lying in the bathtub at the LA Beverly Hilton Hotel, and many people thought that was a very strange way for him to behave. So you could point the finger at somebody like him and say, well, he's obviously one of the key players in this sick industry setup, and he's helping to grease the wheels and keep it all moving along. And then you get executives like Jimmy Iovine and Tommy Mottola of Sony Columbia and people like that. But I think the real occultists that are pulling the strings at the very top of the tree are the ones that keep themselves hidden. The reason we don't know their names is because they don't want you to know their names.
Not who they are, yeah.
And they're in a position to keep themselves out of the public spotlight. It's definitely in their interest to do that.
Now, if they're driving some sort of an agenda, I mean, one person, Jordan Maxwell, I'm sure you've looked into his work. Him and people like him accuse the group. They call it the Illuminati. You know, they use that colloquial term to describe this nefarious group that are running the darker side of this world, if you will. And what he says is, with all the symbolism and all that, it's a form of magic. And he says, whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. He says, these people do. And in order for that magic to work, he said they have to tell you. Is that why there's so much predictive programming in our TV shows? You know, stuff like The Simpsons. The Simpsons seems to be very, very adept at predicting the future.
Yeah, well, predictive programming, there are many reasons that are given for why it's placed there. One of them is the idea that it's mockery. It's a form of mockery of us profane ones. They consider us to be so ignorant of great truths that they can just mock us by placing this stuff right in front of our eyes in the full knowledge that most people will have no idea what's going on. There could be some validity to that. There's also the idea that if you set about trying to create a situation that you wish to manifest in reality, if you present a depiction of it, so you're projecting your will and your imagination into the situation that you wish to see unfold, then you help to give it energetic power, particularly if large numbers of people are watching it in the form of a movie or a pop video or whatever, and they're giving their attention to it, albeit unwittingly. That's another idea as to why it's done. And the main reason why I believe they put all this stuff right out there is because they feel the need to tell us in some coded, cryptic kind of way what they're doing and what they plan to do. And it's their way of getting themselves off the karmic hook, as they see it. They understand consequentialism. They understand natural law and how that works and how karma works to dish out appropriate consequences according to the actions that we choose to take. That's the way the universe is constructed. It's the way spiritual law works. And they feel they can cheat it by giving us an indication of what they plan to do. They feel that they've then given us fair warning, revelation of the method, and when we don't voice any kind of objection to it and say, you can't do this, we're not having it, they take that as a green light to go right ahead and do it, and now they've shifted the burden of the karmic consequence onto us, because we've said we're okay with it.
How are we supposed to object to anything that they plan to do if we're not aware that they plan to do it?
Well, absolutely, and that's the flaw in their thinking. You know, I'm not saying that I go along with the way they view this and I support it and I endorse it in any way. I think these individuals are very mentally deranged. They're sick. They're psychopathic. And I think they've got the whole dynamic of how this works very, very twisted. They feel that they're gods in themselves. They are very arrogant and aloof in the way they approach things. And I really do think they believe they can cheat natural law in this way by finding a loophole around it, by trying to place the onus and the emphasis on us. Doesn't work like that. I would suggest they've got it very twisted and very distorted and flawed in the way they view it.
It's madness. Listen, Mark, I need to go to an ad break, and I want to talk about lifetime actors when I come back. So, do you mind hanging on for a couple of minutes?
Yeah, no worries, brother.
Brilliant, folks. We'll be back in 2 minutes with Mark Devlin.
You're listening to Liffey Sound
on 96.4
FM.
Now, folks, you're very welcome back. The text line is 087 062 7138. That's 087 062 7138. Now, wait in the wings, I do have Mark Devlin. I'm going to go back to Mark now in a couple of seconds. Just give you a little promo. Mark will be appearing at the Open Minds Conference 2, the second one, on the 2nd. It's on the weekend of the 2nd, 3rd and 4th of March in Dooley's Hotel, Waterford. Great venue, great conference. It's brilliant. I was at the one last year, and the crack was 90, as they say in the Isle of Man. It was brilliant, it really was. And Mark is going to be appearing there and doing his presentation about the music industry and the acting industry and other things besides the world in general as well, and the big con that is going on. Anyway, I'm going to go straight back to Mark. Mark, you're still there, yeah?
I'm still here, mate, yep.
Now, I was listening to you on the way up. I always make a point of listening to my guest on one of their interviews. I just pulled something off YouTube, the latest thing that you posted online. And it was the last presentation done, I think it was about a month ago. And I was listening to it, and you were talking about lifetime actors, people like Neil deGrasse Tyson, people like Brian Cox. Now, I know who Brian Cox is because he was in an Irish band called deGrasse years ago. I think he was a keyboard player or something like that. But now he's the #1 professor for the BBC for some reason.
I thought you couldn't swear
Brian
on the radio, Mick. Brian Cox, come on.
I know, yeah.
And
what
Neil
was you were
deGrasse
saying?
Tyson,
BBC stands for that. Bloody Brian Cox or something like that.
BBC,
but
yeah.
I've seen him.
Brian
I've
bloody
seen
Cox,
him
yeah.
coming up, and people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and stuff like that, particularly with the flat earth stuff that's going on out there. And I've been keeping my eye on that myself, you know. And I've listened to a few flat earth interviews. They make a good argument. I'll give them that. But I'm still not convinced that we live on a flat plane. I don't know. I mean, I've never gone high enough to see that. But you've got people like Neil deGrasse Tyson coming out, who happens to have, as you pointed out in your presentation, an IMDb profile, and it lists all the movies that he's been in. But he came out and attacked the flat earth, says, well, we don't live on a sphere. Now, NASA claim we live on a sphere because they took a photograph of it allegedly back in the 1970s, and he says we live on a pear.
Well, he does. Neil deGrasse Tyson is exactly that. He's an actor. And someone else who's an actor is Russell Brand. And someone else who's an actor is Jim Carrey. They're literally actors. And yet these guys come out with extracurricular kind of statements. So, you know, they kind of forget they're actors for a minute. And Russell Brand becomes this people's revolutionary, inspiring us all to rise up against the banksters and all this BS. And Jim Carrey has started talking about consciousness and the true nature of reality and all this kind of stuff. And it's just amazing to me that people fall for it because what do actors do? They rehearse scripts and they recite them on cue. And that's exactly what these people are doing. Neil deGrasse Tyson, before he emerged as this wonderful astrophysicist that so many people seem to think he is, was a bit part actor. He's appeared in many movies and he has that IMDb database. And so lifetime actors are people that are presented to us as one thing, whether it be a politician or a Hollywood actor or a television presenter or a musician. But when you go delving into their background in terms of their family bloodlines, their ancestry, which is key to so much, who was their father? Who was their grandfather? What other relatives do they have? What are some of their affiliations in terms of where they studied? What universities were they a part of? What secret societies were they a part of? It's just incredible. When you go delving into these kind of backgrounds, you discover time and time again links going back to previous members of that bloodline who were also placed into the public eye in some role or other. And you get links to secret societies like Skull and Bones and Bohemian Club. You get affiliations with the Frankfurt School and the Tavistock Institute and Cambridge and Oxford universities and Stanford Research Institute, the Esalen Institute, all these different organizations that are all about social engineering, culture creation, mass mind control. And you find it time and time again. And you come to realise that anyone that is placed in any kind of prominent position in the public eye, to the point that if you went into the average high street and said, have you heard of such and such? Have you heard of Bill Gates? Have you heard of Richard Branson? And people go, well, of course I have. Well then, their career has been facilitated for them, because it's never left to chance as to which individuals rise to those kind of positions. Mark Zuckerberg, come on now. We're really supposed to believe this is some dorky college kid that invented Facebook in his dorm and took it to where it is now. Bill Gates is supposed to be this computer nerdy geek that invented Microsoft in his garage. Come on now. How likely is all of this? When you really do the research, you come to realise that all these people are given to us. They're served up to us, and most people lap them all up, just like they're instructed to do. And they're playing right into the hands of the social engineers that use these people to steer culture off in desired directions. They're Pied Pipers. They sweep up large numbers of people and they take them down whatever route has been deemed appropriate.
No, you mentioned earlier on in the interview that I was listening to on the way up, you were talking about Barack Obama and the debacle surrounding his birth certificate, but you also mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger in the same presentation. And I've always had this theory since that this thing blew up about Barack Obama's birth certificate, because when it blew up back in 2008 when he got elected, that was the first time we'd heard of it. Well, in the run-up to the election, we'd been hearing of it. And I remember thinking at the time, what's going on here? Because I was at the stage where, and you were probably at the same stage yourself because you were reading your David Icke books, you know, the whole world was just bullshit to me at that stage, and I was trying to figure it all out, and I was delving into an awful lot of stuff, and I couldn't help thinking, why would they be going on about this? What difference does it make? We know American presidents are selected, you know, and I had no doubt about that in my mind. So I was wondering, what is the agenda here? And then it dawned on me, because through David Icke, I'd learned that Arnold Schwarzenegger, in his autobiography, had clearly stated that he wanted to be the king of the world. Now, at the time he was the governor of California, I knew that he could never become the American president because of his nationality. He was Austrian-born. And the theory I came up with at the time, and I still stand by this theory to this day, and I still believe it may happen, is that the reason for the Barack Obama birth certificate debacle was to put it into public consciousness first. But a few years down the line, it hasn't happened yet, but it could still happen. And I'm thinking after Trump, anything is possible now. What will happen is the truth will come out about Barack Obama's birth certificate. Oh, yes, he was born in Kenya. But by that stage then, the world will probably have gone through an awful lot of crap. And people won't give a toss. They won't care whether Barack Obama was born in Kenya or anywhere else at this stage. What they will do then is they will change the constitution to allow non-born Americans become the president, i.e. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who will come back out of the woodwork and maybe run for that office and get it. You know, and I said that's just a theory, but that is still a possibility as long as that man is still alive.
Well, it could well be. I mean, nothing would surprise me. Arnie is bloodline, you know, he comes from one of these important bloodlines. There's a picture that I show in some of my talks where he's at a bodybuilding contest very early on in his career, back in the 60s. And he's picking up this trophy, he's won this competition, and the host who presents him with the trophy is none other than Jimmy Savile, who shakes him by the hand in a very interesting way. Take a look at the handshake. And the whole thing with Barack Obama and his photoshopped fake birth certificate, which it clearly was, is it just amazes me what people will let go. When it emerged that that was photoshopped, people should have been up in arms about it. And there should have been instant calls all over the US for him to have been impeached or kicked out of office. They were talking about impeaching Bill Clinton over a blowjob. So is this not a little more serious and grounds for him being kicked out of office? And yet, you know, people just let it go. And you could argue that it didn't make the mainstream media, so a lot of people didn't hear about it. But nevertheless, it was revealed. And it just reminds me of the situation with Jimmy Savile when that emerged in the UK. And everyone came to comprehend that this guy had been a disgusting, grotesque serial paedophile for all these decades, employed by the BBC, knighted by the Queen, close personal friend of the royal family, and people just let it go. How do you let something like that go?
But can I ask you, Mark, and I'm not defending Jimmy Savile by no stretch of the imagination, but there's something I've always pointed out anytime his name comes up. He was never convicted of any offence.
Well, he never was while he was alive, no, because he
That's
had
what
protection.
I mean. He was never, all this stuff came out. Don't get me wrong, you had people like Johnny Rotten, John Lydon back in the 70s, intimating that Jimmy Savile, wasn't everything that he was cracked up to be, that he was this sleazy character. I mean, he gave that away in the 70s in various interviews. But I always point out, and as I said, I'm not defending Jimmy Savile, and I don't want anyone thinking I am. If everything about that man is true, he was the devil incarnate. But he was never actually convicted of anything.
No, because he had protection. And there's a pattern that emerges here. Even if you are tempted to consider Savile as an isolated case, look at the situation with Ted Heath. It's come out that Ted Heath, a former British Prime Minister, was up to his neck in sordid paedophilia, and there's been accusations of him taking young boys out on this yacht that he had, sailing out towards Jersey, and many of these boys were never seen again. The implication being that, they were sexually abused and then killed and thrown overboard. This is a former British Prime Minister, and there are so many politicians, so many sirs and lords that have been exposed only after their death. Sir Cyril Smith, Sir Clement Freud, Lord McAlpine, Lord Greville Janner. It only comes out after these people have supposedly died that they were up to all this stuff. So here's the pattern. We only get to hear about it after they've died and they can no longer be held accountable for it. You never hear about it while they're still alive.
But isn't that the thing though, Mark? And like I said, I'm not defending any of them. But isn't it the thing that a dead man has no defence?
Or it's another
is there another agenda at play here? This is what I'm asking. Is there another agenda at play here?
Is it another aspect of revelation of the method? Are they telling us after the event, oops, sorry, we just discovered he was a paedophile, but he's dead now, so we can't do anything about it.
This is what I'm saying. A lot of these people were iconic figures in the, in the public psyche. Like Jimmy Savile was probably one of the most iconic people in British history.
Well, he was, but I don't understand what the value would be in exposing them after they've died if they weren't into all this stuff.
But this is what I'm wondering. I'm wondering, I'm on the side of most people who believe Jimmy Savile is what everybody said he was. I'm not trying to say he wasn't. What I'm saying is there an agenda at play here? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Is there something going on that we're not aware of yet?
Well, if there's a reason why they're throwing all these people to the dogs once they've died and they can't defend themselves, I don't know what that agenda would be.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm asking. Like, do you think there is anything else? But obviously, you don't know what it would be, and neither do I. For that matter, I don't think anybody.
Yeah, I have no idea what such an agenda would be. No.
Yeah, it's a strange one, all right. Now, getting back to Barack Obama, what do you think the whole agenda was with him? I mean, you mentioned in that interview I was listening earlier about Jude. What's her name? The talk show host, Joan Rivers.
Oh, Joan Rivers, yeah.
Now, I remember that scene where she's walking into a clinic and she says to the cameraman, because he asked about Obama, and she says, Michelle is actually Michael.
Yeah.
And everybody knows it. I.e., everybody in the entertainment industry knows it. And in public life now, the average Joe on the street obviously didn't.
Yeah, I think everyone in the industry did know that Michelle is really Michael. And it's clear that that was the case. There's documentation which has emerged to show that Michelle's original name was Michael Vaughan Robinson.
Right.
So I'm sure they're all having a bloody good laugh at the rest of us over that one.
That clinic where that video was filmed, where she's walking up the steps into a clinic, is that where she later died, in that clinic?
I'm not entirely sure, I mean, she died pretty soon after that, and a lot of people have found that suspicious. I'm not sure where it was.
It's a strange one. Can I ask you, Mark, what do you make of all these celebrities? And I was talking to Trevor earlier, and I did say I wasn't going to bring up Dolores O'Riordan because she's one of our own over here. And, I wouldn't like to think that she was caught up in any of this bloody crap that's going on in the music industry. She had her own mental health difficulties over here a while ago. She was in a hospital here in Dublin, a mental hospital for bipolar, I think. But and tragically, we lost Dolores last week, an absolute icon in the Irish music business. But what's your theory about all these singers, winding up dead in hotel rooms? Do you think there's connections with any of this, like symbolically speaking?
Exactly. I've started to call it death by hotel room because it's becoming very common. So there have been many artists over the decades in different parts of the world that have turned up dead in very suspicious circumstances in hotel rooms. So, quite convenient in terms of them being locked away from public scrutiny on their own in a hotel room, so no one else can say with any certainty what happened. So you could think back to Janis Joplin was discovered dead in a hotel room. Whitney Houston discovered unconscious in a bathtub in a hotel room. Michael Hutchence of INXS discovered in a hotel room in Sydney. Chris Cornell turns up dead, having apparently killed himself in a hotel room in Detroit. And now we get Dolores O'Riordan turning up dead in a hotel room in London. And again, it's all about patterns and trends, and I always look for these. And one thing I've noticed with so many of these artists is at the time that they pass away in these very suspicious circumstances, some of them are chalked up as suicide. So, like I say, Chris Cornell is said to have done himself in. Hutchence is said to have done himself in as well. But so many of these artists have spoken to close friends or family in the hours before their bodies are discovered. And they're said to be full of optimism, in good spirits, and making plans for the future.
But one thing I've noticed, if I could just interject, one pattern I've noticed myself is that a lot of these artists who wind up dead in hotel rooms their career would sort of be waning and they're about to make comebacks.
Exactly.
I've always noticed that. They're always about just to make a comeback.
Exactly. So many times. So, Michael Jackson, his career had been flopping for a few years, but he was ready to come back with that series of This Is It concerts in London in 2009. It's either that or they've just got a brand new project that's just about to be unleashed. Stanley Kubrick passed away just before Eyes Wide Shut was due to come out. John Lennon was assassinated just at the time his Double Fantasy album came out after a 5-year hiatus. Prince was said to be working on new material. And we get this with so many other artists. With Dolores O'Riordan, she was in London to link up with this group Bad Wolves to go in and record a cover version of the Cranberries record Zombie. She was going to lay down some new vocals. And there's a former bandmate of hers that says he spoke to her on the phone the night before she was discovered dead, and she was in very good spirits and looking forward to the future, making plans for the week. So she doesn't sound like someone that was ready to take her own life. Interestingly, with this one, no cause of death has been given. The police have made a statement saying her death is not suspicious. Are you kidding? And the coroner has said that there will be no details released of her autopsy or any of the toxicology tests until April at the earliest. So why would that be? That's weeks and weeks and weeks. And why would you make an announcement this far forward to say you're not going to get the results for several weeks if there's nothing suspicious about it? See, the way so many of these artists passing away is gotten away with is through this implication that these rock and roll stars are into these wild, crazy lifestyles, It's always kind of implied. They don't even need to put any detail on it. All you got to do is to say to most people, oh, this rock singer has turned up dead in a hotel room. And most people's minds will go to, oh, it's probably drugs. Yeah, they all do drugs, these rock stars, or they've overdosed on painkillers or sleeping pills or whatever because of their crazy rock and roll lifestyles. So that's the way they get away with it. All these rock stars turning up dead in hotel rooms. If checkout grocery assistants were dying at this kind of rate, people would be saying, why are there so many checkout grocery assistants dying? Yeah. Or, lorry drivers. Why are so many lorry drivers dying? But with rock singers, nobody seems to question it because it's just chalked up as that crazy rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah. Listen, I need to go to my last ad break, so you hang on there for a couple of seconds. Folks, I'll be back in a couple of minutes with Mark Devlin. Talk to us all very shortly. Now, folks, you're very welcome back. The text line is 087 062 7138. 087 062 7138. Now, Ray Moore, who's one of my avid listeners, he's been listening to the show for years. Good evening, Ray. I hope you're keeping well. Happy New Year to you. In relation to Jimmy Savile, he said the Savile agenda could have been, look at how we protect our own. We can do anything we like and never get caught. You will never find out till they are safely dead. Like Kennedy, we killed them right before your eyes and we even televised it. And you're still trying to work it out. That's very, very true, Ray. Well said. I don't know if you heard what I just read out there that one of my listeners sent in there, Mark.
Yeah, I did, and I think he's along the right lines with that. I would certainly go along with it.
Ray is one of those who's a bit more awake than the average person. He's an absolute gentleman. Lives over in Huddersfield in the UK. One of my oldest listeners, and fair play to him. An absolute gent, and he always comments on certain topics on the show. Sometimes I get to his texts, sometimes I don't. Now, you just sent me a text to yourself, Mark, in relation to Dolores. So we were talking about Dolores O'Riordan just before the break there. Do you have anything more to say about that issue?
Well, just a couple of bits. And I'm always conscious of when an artist has passed away and we don't have all the details. I don't want to be insensitive and cast aspersions or jump to conclusions. And I know that she was very well loved in Ireland. And I know that a lot of people in that nation are mourning her passing, and she was a great singer. I love the Cranberries music as well. It's always the ones I like that seem to check out early. And the ones you don't particularly care for just go on for decades.
Yeah.
But I'm just looking at a newspaper report here talking about her background. And it mentions the battles she'd faced throughout her life. She'd urged others to seek help with their mental health. So she had some mental health history herself, mental health problems. She admitted she suffered from anorexia and depression after being sexually abused as a child.
Yeah.
And we hear this story with so many celebrities. So many of them talk about having suffered sexual abuse as a child. And it reaches a point where it goes beyond just these random life stories, and it starts again to become a pattern. And the question becomes, why is it that so many of these people that go on to become celebrities were sexually abused as children? It seems to tie into the way these individuals are selected to be put into these public roles, and it seems to have a connection to trauma-based mind control programming, which is endemic throughout these industries, as anyone embarking on that area of research will find.
It's like you've always said, and I've always maintained this as well, you don't get to the top of your game in that game unless you're allowed to, and the powers that be will not let you rise. And a case in point, and you should look into them yourself, is Irish rock band Aslan. Now, and I've said this to you before, Mark, on the previous show, if you listen to the lyrics of most of their songs, it's the kind of stuff that the powers that be do not want the average person to listen to. They're uplifting lyrics. They're telling you to get up off your ass and make a life for yourself and stuff like that. And there's some absolutely fantastic songs. Lyrically, they're absolutely brilliant. The guy who wrote them, Christy Dignam, along with other members of Aslan, they're absolute geniuses, because these guys were brought up in hardship, genuine hardship, on the north side of Dublin. They grew up in working class families, so they would have been at the butt end of society, putting up with all the crap that we all have to put up on a daily basis. So the songs were reflective of that, and I wouldn't even call them protest songs, but they're the kind of songs that the powers that be don't want you listening to.
Exactly.
And therefore, they were never allowed to rise beyond that. One of the biggest bands in Ireland. I mean, I think they're more popular than U2 in this country. They would be, they play pubs most of the time, but they always packed up their gigs out. They're always packed. And unfortunately, the lead singer now, he's not too well at the moment, the poor chap. But he's still knocking out the gigs, But like I said...
Well, I've never heard of them. I'll be honest, I've never heard of them. I'll
send you a link to them and have a listen to them. Seriously, they're a very, very good band.
Yeah, and there'll be a reason why I've never heard of them, because they don't get that kind of exposure, which is the point you're making. Let me throw another name at you. Have you heard of a rapper by the name of K Reno?
Never.
Exactly. This guy is a genius. I heard another of his new tracks today. For me, he's the realist out there in terms of the truth that he speaks in his rhymes. But most people have never heard of him, and they want it that way.
They won't let him rise.
People have heard of Little Uzi Vert and Little Yachty and Migos and Little Wayne, but they haven't heard of K Reno, because they want you to be familiar with all these garbage artists, but they don't want you hearing the truth from these genuine, truly creative, independent spirits.
Yeah, poets.
Yeah, and so his music is kept down. But this guy is an absolute genius, and if anyone wants to seek out his work, I think there's a bunch of his videos on YouTube. His name is spelt K-R-I-N-O, K Reno. He's an absolute phenomenon. So a case in point there, that's the kind of artist they don't want you to hear about, so they get no radio airplay, you never see them on TV, you never hear them ringing off in a club. And yet, that's the music people need to be listening to, because it's truly inspiring. Here's
the funny thing, though. If you ask the average Irish person, why has Aslan never made it on the international stage? They'll turn around and they'll tell you, it's because the lead singer was a heroin addict. And I remind them, hang on a minute, all the bloody Rolling Stones used every drug under the sun. They're all are. Every musician takes drugs. If you think musicians don't take drugs, throw out every album you've ever bought, because most of them are written while these musicians were out of their faces on drugs.
That's right.
So
Well, they're all selected. All these groups are placed into these positions. None of it is done by accident. So groups either start out under their own steam and they display a bit of talent, and there are spotters, observers working for the industry whose job it is to sniff out this emerging talent that shows some potential, and they're made an offer that they can't refuse, so to speak. They're offered a contract and they're invited to join the club. And when they sign that contract, their careers go through the roof. But from that point on, they're no longer calling the shots. They're having the shots called for them. It's either that, or these groups, in the very first instance, come from one of these backgrounds that I spoke about earlier, a bloodline background or some other kind of affiliation or association. And so these acts are put onto the scene from day one on a controlled basis. It's one thing or the other in terms of groups that you've heard of.
You have to sell your soul to the devil.
Well, you do, and people think that's just some pithy kind of metaphor, but I would suggest there's a very real sense in which that takes place. I don't believe there's a singular entity called the devil, but what you're doing is selling your soul, that part of it is true, across to evil, to the evil forces that control these industries, which are satanic. And I use that phrase meaning in opposition to everything that is good and natural in creation.
Yeah. And that's a great way of putting it, because when you say the word satanic, people automatically think about the devil and stuff like that. That's not what you're saying. You're just talking about the darker side of people's psychology.
I'm talking about, Satan. The word Satan in the Hebrew and the Arabic means opposer or adversary. And it's opposing God. It's opposing nature. It's opposing the divine. And they've done a very good job, these culture creators and social engineers, of actually getting the majority of people in society into a satanic mindset where it's all about them. Satanism is about service to self. What suits me? What do I want in my life? Screw everyone and everything else. It's all about me. Me, me, me. Now, if people are really honest with themselves, how many people do you know whose whole way of going about their life is just that? What suits me right now in the circumstances in which I find myself? That is the way they've conditioned most people to go about their lives. That's what materialism is all about. That's what advertising is all about. Go and buy a whole bunch of stuff to make yourself happier, to boost your life, and don't give any thought to the way your behaviours and your actions and your attitudes might be affecting other people and putting harm into the world. It's a satanic mindset, and people are conditioned and entrained to take it on through modern society.
It's madness. Now listen, we've got about 6 minutes left, and I want to pick your brain about one of the more unusual conspiracies, if you want to call them that, and that's the one about Paul McCartney, allegedly dying in 1966 and being replaced by a guy called Billy Shears. Is it Billy Shears?
Billy Shears, William Shepherd.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story briefly?
Mick, my position on that whole thing has changed a whole lot since I first started speaking about it.
Well, you're entitled to change, and that's the mark of an educated mind, if you're willing to change your opinion on certain issues. So go ahead.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I feel so. My position has changed since I put the first book out. So in the first book, I'm detailing the whole Paul is dead myth or legend, which is the idea that the original Paul McCartney died in a car crash, according to this legend, and was replaced by an imposter that's been taking his place to this day. And I fell for that one for quite some time because all the symbolic clues and all the apparent evidence seemed to back up that theory. But like I say, I've delved further into it. I've done a whole load of research, probably to the point of obsession, probably beyond the point at which it's healthy. I probably should have stopped a long time ago.
We're all guilty of doing that in the truth movement, Whether it's Flat Earth, Paul McCartney, Michael Jackson, it doesn't matter what the subject is. Sometimes you can get deep into it.
Some people are obsessed by football and they follow their team around wherever they play, and
exactly.
But with us, it's this. I think this is a bit more worthwhile than football.
So you don't subscribe to the theory now that Paul McCartney died in a car crash and was replaced?
I'll tell you what it is. The only thing I can say with any great certainty now is there has been more than one Paul McCartney. I can make that as a definitive statement. If you look at pictures and video footage of what is said to be Paul McCartney...
I've seen the pictures you put up, Mark. I have seen them. And
it's more than one guy.
People, yeah.
So what I think we're looking at is definitely there have been two individuals claiming to be Paul McCartney, but in actual fact it's more than two. There have been other stand-ins that have played the role as well. I mean, the whole thing is just so complex, but I think it goes beyond the fact that the original Paul was killed or even disappeared off the scene at a given point, and that an imposter took the place from that point on.
And
what I think has been the case. Sorry, what's that?
Why do you think they would do that? What's the point?
Well, that's a good question, and it's the one that everyone comes with. I think there's a very good chance that this whole thing was done, dating back to the 1960s, as a massive psyop or mind control experiment to see whether they can get away with it.
To see what they feel people.
Whether the controllers, the handlers behind this situation could get away with switching out one of the most famous people in the world, and nobody really noticed, or certainly not enough people in their large numbers. I mean, the whole thing is very complex, and I've got a chapter in the new book where I clarify my position on it now. And I also make the point that as truth seekers, we should be in a constant state of flux, where if new information comes along and it replaces what was there before, we need to be prepared to change our position and not rigidly stick to concrete ideas. So that's certainly the case with me on this one. But what I can tell you is there's been more than one Paul McCartney. There is a theory that what we may have been looking at all these years is twins, and I think that's quite possible. And it goes a lot further.
When Paul McCartney came to prominence back in the 1950s with the Beatles, you would have known about those four through the media, but you wouldn't have known jack shit about the rest of the families.
Well, there was no internet back then, so nobody was able
to say that he didn't have a twin. He may very well have had a twin.
Yeah, and you would not be able to get away with something like that in this day and age, where people are able to do their own research and use the internet and communicate information. But back in the 60s, nobody was able to do that, so it was so much easier to carry this off.
It would have been a hell of a lot easier to carry it off back in the 1960s. And it's like you said earlier on at the start of the show, where you've gone back over the 1980s looking for symbology in music videos, and you found absolutely tons of it. And I grew up in the 1980s watching all of these videos that you speak of and never noticed a damn thing. But yet it was there. They were getting away with it even back then. So, God knows what they've been getting away with over the, history. I mean, most of our history is a lie anyway.
Well, yeah, everything is a lie. It's going back to how I started this conversation. You come to realise that we've been lied to about everything. So you can either handle that or you can't, and you either resolve to never let it happen again, or you allow yourself to continue to dwell under mind control, and that ain't me. That's just not the way I go about things.
And that's what I like about you most, Mark. You're a straight talker, and I love following your posts on Facebook. A lot of them make me chuckle, I have to say now, particularly the Paul McCartney stuff. But you do. You post some great stuff. Listen, we've got about 2 minutes left. Do you want to plug the conference?
Yeah, the Open Minds Ireland Conference, Dooley's Hotel, Waterford. It's Friday 2nd to Sunday 4th of March. Loads and loads of speakers. I'm not sure how many exactly, but they're covering all aspects of human freedom, sovereignty, truth, conspiracy, natural health, just breaking through the BS of all the official versions of stuff that we're given by authority sources. It's all about people taking back their power and realizing that we are inherently free. We're inherently free sovereign beings. The powers that be try to enslave us. They try to manipulate and coerce us and make us think we're considerably less than we really are in our true nature. But this conference is all about telling you the truth about all these matters. So I'm certainly looking forward to absorbing what all the other speakers have to say.
What day are you speaking, Mark?
What day am I speaking?
Yeah, do you know which day? Are you on the Friday, Saturday or the Sunday?
Yeah, I'm on the Sunday, 10:45 till 12. So I'll be presenting aspects of Musical Truth too. As I say, I don't know exactly which aspects yet, but I think I'm going to be bringing up Dolores O'Riordan. I'm going to have some stuff to say about that because I'm in Ireland. It's going to be relevant. So,
well, I did actually miss your last presentation because I didn't arrive down till late on the Saturday afternoon, and you'd already done your little stint on stage. But I did have the pleasure of meeting you down there. You were sitting at the door with your books and stuff like that. So we did have a brief chat. But I'm looking forward to your presentation because I will be there on the Sunday for that. So I really look forward to that. Listen, Mark, thanks very much for coming on at the very last minute. I really appreciate you coming on to the show tonight.
Yeah, no problems, man. Good to be back with you, and I look forward to seeing you in Waterford. I
look forward to it, Mark, and I'll talk to you then. Take a handy, and you look after yourself.
All right, man, and you.
Thanks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was the wonderful Mark Devlin, DJ. He's got 2 great books out, Musical Truth 1 and Musical Truth 2. You can go onto his website, I think it's markdevlin.co.uk, and he is appearing at the Open Minds Conference. If you want to know more about that conference, you can check out their website, openmindsconference.com, and that's on in Dooley's Hotel on the 2nd, 3rd and 4th of March. So it's not that long to go now. It's only a few more weeks, and that's in Dooley's Hotel on the Quays in Waterford. Great hotel. It's an old, very old style hotel, but I'll tell you now, Saturday night in there, the crack is absolutely 90. It is brilliant. So I'm looking forward to that conference, heading down for that. Anyway, folks, this has been The World You Don't Know. I have unfortunately come to the end of the show, so let me see, now I have that there. It is the end of the show. And remember, as I always say in the show, the world is full of wonderful people. If you can't find one, be one. Until next time, take care. Talk to you all very soon.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret society, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Breaking humanity, one soul at a time. This is the World You Don't Know radio show with your host, Nick O'Connor.